Good morning, Guardians, and a happy Monday to all of you. My name is the Black Link, and we are only one day away at the time of this recording, literally 24 hours away from the launch of the next bit of content in Destiny 2, Season of the Drifter. And I gotta say, despite the fact that I've been playing a lot of other games as of late, I'm actually feeling kind of excited about this. I think when Season of the Drifter comes out, the thing I'm most looking forward to is probably going to be the Thorn Quest. You Guardians know that is my absolute favorite exotic from Destiny 1, and I am so psyched to get it back in Destiny 2. Hopefully, it's not time-gated any more than us having to wait until March 12th to roll around. That's definitely the bit of content I am most looking forward to with Season of the Drifter. And you know what, at the start of this video, why don't you Guardians let me know down in the comment section below what you're most excited for. There's a lot of stuff to look forward to, and we've covered it in the last couple of videos. We had a Vidoc come out showing off Gambit Prime, The Reckoning, a new in-game PvE Pinnacle game mode. We've got the Revelry Spring event, we've got 3 brand new Pinnacle weapons for the Crucible, the Vanguard, and for Gambit. And still there is even more to cover. In this video, we're going to be covering some of the stuff we learned from the TWAB. In particular, a few sandbox changes for certain weapon archetypes. So let's go ahead and dive right on into that. In this week's TWAB, Bungie showed us that they want to start making legendary heavy weapons compete with some of the exotic options that we've got available right now. They bring up the fact that when it comes to putting out massive damage, your best options are all basically exotic, stuff like the Legend of Acreus, the Thunderlord, of course, the Mighty Whisper of the Worm, and that it kind of makes it feel like most legendary options just aren't really up to snuff with competing with some of the exotics. They state that exotics will always have their unique properties, but a well-rolled legendary power weapon should be able to compete in raw damage with an exotic power weapon, although the legendary weapon may need conditional setups and mods to outright match. And that's something I definitely agree with. A lot of the legendary power weapons in Destiny 2 don't really match up too much with a lot of the exotic weapons. There's usually a better exotic option out there. And whenever you're in a big damage situation, say soloing Vorgeth in the Shattered Throne dungeon, generally people are whipping out stuff like Whisper of the Worm or Thunderlord rather than a hammerhead or a grenade launcher. And so we get a sneak peek at some changes coming to some heavy weapons when that update goes live tomorrow. In particular, grenade launchers and rocket launchers are going to be getting some interesting buffs. Let's go ahead and dive on in. First up for grenade launchers, their PvE damage is getting increased by 25%. That's a massive increase in damage, which is definitely needed for that weapon class. I almost never use grenade launchers in PvE. Additionally, reserve ammo is going to be increased on most grenade launchers, and in most cases, grenade launchers have gained 3 rounds in reserve, but this amount may vary based on the perks that you have like field prep. And finally, magazine perks and mods will no longer have an effect on ammo reserves. So some very big changes for grenade launchers there. That 25% damage increase is definitely going to be well appreciated, especially if it applies to some of the primary and special grenade launchers that we have right now, like the Fighting Lion and the Malicious Birthright. Definitely looking forward to trying those out when Tuesday rolls around. Although I think any buff that class of weapon gets is going to be appreciated by most players. Next up, we've got huge changes coming to rocket launchers. For rockets, their PvE damage is increased by 60 to 65%. And they go on to note that exotic rocket launchers have had their damage tuned separately. That in and of itself is a massive change. Rockets have kind of always felt a little bit on the weak side in PvE in Destiny 2, outside of like the Wardcliff coil. So getting a 60 to 65 increase in damage is going to be huge, especially for some of those higher impact rockets that we have. But that's not all that's happening. The Cluster Bomb perk is also going to be seeing a pretty big change. This is having its damage reduced by 80%. But before you get super mad and start lighting up that keyboard, this lost damage was moved to the rocket launcher's main projectile, as noted in the above damage increase. So basically, that 80% damage that clusters are losing is getting moved into the rocket itself. So basically, the initial hit, the impact and initial explosion of your main rocket is going to do way more damage in the Season of the Drifter than it is right now. But cluster bombs are going to be doing a little bit less damage. And they go on to explain why they made that change right here. Rocket launchers were entirely too dependent on cluster bombs to be effective. Like the full auto perk on shotguns, cluster bombs would nearly double the damage output of any given rocket launcher, under optimal conditions. The result was that on any target that you couldn't get all the cluster bombs to impact and detonate, rocket launchers fell by the wayside pretty harshly. By moving most of the damage of cluster bombs into the rocket itself, Rocket launchers will now be more reliable and more effective all around, especially against aerial targets that cluster bombs would almost never damage. And some of that is definitely true. Aerial targets would almost never get hit by cluster bombs, so I'm happy to see that some of that damage is going to be applied now. And they're definitely right to say that right now the only rolls that are worth it on rocket launchers are cluster bomb rolls. I would argue that cluster bomb was okay, they just needed to bump up some of the other rolls. It was sort of a grenades and horseshoes type of situation like what we had back in Destiny 1, where the only perks you wanted on a rocket launcher were like tripod, grenades and horseshoes for PvP, and like tripod and cluster bombs for PvE. My argument then is the same as it is now, just make some of the other perks for rockets better. And by the way, I think it would be okay if we brought back grenades and horseshoes for PvP. Nobody uses rockets outside of Warcliff Coil in PvP. I don't know, that's just my opinion, Guardians. I know there's a lot of you guys out there who played a lot of PvP in Destiny 1 and are sweating at the very thought of grenades and horseshoes making any sort of comeback. But there we go, those are the big changes coming to grenade launchers and rocket launchers when the Season of the Drifter goes live on March 5th. I'm super excited about some of these changes. Grenade launchers have felt entirely too weak for entirely too long. You haven't really had much of a reason to use them in PvE. So getting that damage increase alongside the higher magazine size is definitely going to be appreciated on a lot of the other grenade launchers out there. Now, if we could just get some of the perks on there to work a little bit better so that, proximity detonation isn't the best thing, then we might really be in business when it comes to grenade launchers. And of course, for these rockets, I'm super happy that rocket damage is getting a massive increase in PvE. And while the cluster nerf does have me sweating a little bit, we'll have to check the damage numbers after the patch comes out to see if we're still dealing massive amounts of damage. Because like I said, it looks like they're just taking the extra damage from clusters and putting that on the initial impact and explosion of the rocket itself. So who knows, you may still be able to do the Riven cheese even after the patch, although there's plenty of other weapons you can do it with, stuff like Thunderlord and whatnot. But alright Guardians, that is pretty much it for this video. I really wanted to just talk about some of the heavy weapon changes that are going to be coming in tomorrow's patch. We will be getting full patch notes when the Season of the Drifter goes live, so make sure you're staying tuned for the video we'll have covering everything that's changing tomorrow. But there we go Guardians, that's it for this one, and those are my thoughts on the changes that were outlined in last week's TWAB. Be sure to leave me yours down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest stuff we're putting out. But alright Guardians, we're done for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians stay frosty, and I'll see you in the Season of the Drifter.